You're making great progress. Let's move forward to our next section. We will now cover abusive conduct prevention in the workplace. What is abusive conduct? California law defines abusive conduct as conduct of an employer or employee in the workplace with malice that a reasonable person would find hostile, offensive, and unrelated to an employer's legitimate business interests. Abusive conduct, which is also referred to as bullying, may include repeated infliction of verbal or physical conduct that a reasonable person would find threatening, intimidating, or humiliating. It can also include the gratuitous sabotage or undermining of a person's work performance. In determining abusive conduct, it is important to understand the terms used, such as repeated behavior and a reasonable person. In addition to knowing that a single act of the behavior shall not constitute abusive conduct unless it is especially severe and egregious. Repeated behavior means that it's not a single isolated incident. Reasonable person is a hypothetical person who exercises average care, skill, and judgment in conduct. Here's a fact. Abusive conduct can happen to anyone. Unlike harassment, which targets someone in a protected class or due to their sexual nature. Abusive conduct can take many forms, and sometimes it can be hard to determine if behavior is abusive or just an individual having a bad day. Keeping in mind the following terms and the definition of abusive conduct can help you make the distinction. The examples listed below are not intended to be an exhaustive list, but simply provide behaviors that may be considered abusive conduct. For example, verbal abuse. It can include slandering, ridiculing, bullying, gossiping, or bad-mouthing someone against others. It can also include persistent name-calling, which is hurtful, insulting, or embarrassing, yelling and screaming, or frequent criticism that undermines the victim's ability to perform his or her job. Other examples of abusive conduct include nonverbal, visual, and physical abuse, such as threatening gestures, actions, or glances, shunning or excluding or disregarding a person, offensive depictions of another through a visual medium, for example, a drawing or a doctored photograph, mimicking another in an offensive manner, and intimidation or violence like throwing things or hitting desks are also examples. Physical abuse can include pushing, shoving, punching, kicking, poking, tripping, or purposefully impeding a person's path or threatening physical harm, damaging another person's work area, or even their property. In today's society, we have technology to consider because it has created a new avenue that can be used to create abusive conduct such as cyber abuse. Cyber abuse can include tormenting, threatening behavior, cyberbullying, harassing, embarrassing, or targeting another using social media such as emails, instant messaging, text messaging, or any other type of digital technology. And lastly, workplace interference, such as sabotaging another's work or deliberately tampering with a person's work area or property, assigning menial tasks outside of a person's normal job duties. All these behaviors can create an abusive or bullying conduct, which is unacceptable. As previously stated, victims of abusive conduct can include anyone. Victims of abusive conduct can include the intended target or an observer of the conduct. It's irrelevant whether or not the offender intended his or her conduct to be abusive. What matters is the reasonable person's standard. Similar to harassment or discrimination, abusive conduct has a negative impact to the organization. It can cause low morale, loss of productivity, increased turnover, and therefore has no place in the workplace. Employees have the right to work in a safe, non-abusive working environment, and each employee has the responsibility and ability to avoid abusive behavior by treating other employees, customers, and vendors with respect and consideration. It is important to report abusive conduct immediately following the organization's policy. If you are on the receiving end of the abusive conduct, or if you witness it happening to someone else, report it. Abusive conduct is against the organization's policy and it will not be tolerated. What if the abusive person is your supervisor? If you are being subject to abusive conduct by your supervisor, report it to someone else who has the authority to act, like another manager or someone in HR, and someone you feel comfortable speaking with. Just because someone in a position of power abuses you, it does not mean that the organization would condone the behavior. It is understandable that reporting abusive conduct can be difficult, but the organization's policy is designed to ensure that management helps by taking immediate measures to protect you, conducting a fair and prompt investigation into the abuse, taking corrective action to stop the abuse from reoccurring, help in repairing a work record or reputation that may have been affected, and lastly, provide advice if you are not sure how to approach the situation. When reporting abusive conduct, you can help by documenting the incidences, including specific dates and times. What happened? Who was involved? And when did it happen? Include witness information, such as their names and titles, and provide evidence whenever possible, for example, emails, pictures, or video. Retaliation is strictly prohibited by the organization's policy and the law. Regardless of who the abusive person was, whether it be your supervisor, another employee, customer, or vendor, no one is allowed to retaliate against you for reporting abusive conduct. If you feel that you are a victim of retaliation, report it immediately per the organization's policy.